So hopefully, let me just refresh Vaughan to see that we are actually live, and we'll get started. And there we go. We are indeed live. So welcome everyone to another exciting edition of the Magic Sandwich Show, which, if figures are to be believed, is show number 118. And it's a huge pleasure to welcome one of our regulars, Hogtie Champ, but also an even huger pleasure to welcome back for the second time on the show, Andrew Copson, who is the Chief Executive of the British Humanist Association, and has been and held that position, I think, for the last 5 years now. Welcome to the show, Andrew.
Thank you.
You look shocked. Does it seem like 5 years for you?
It doesn't seem like 5 years. It seems to be a much shorter period, but I suppose that's the way with these things. It has been 5 years, you're right.
And can I just quickly have a thumbs up from people in the chat on Vaughan, just to make sure that everyone can be heard? There's about a 9-second delay, I think, so just give me a few seconds. Can everyone be heard? Yep, we can all be heard. That's excellent. I've got something right for once. It's about the first time ever. I'll move my microphone a little bit closer because people always say I'm a bit quiet. Andrew, let's start with you. As I say, Chief Executive of the British Humanist Association. I'm sure a lot of countries, a lot of places have humanist organisations, but for those that don't, explain firstly, how would you describe a humanist?
Well, in the UK at least, and in lots of other parts of the world that speak English, for the last 100 years or so, the word humanist has come to mean someone who has a non-religious approach to life, who sees the universe as a natural phenomenon to be explained through the scientific method rather than some sort of place where there might be a supernatural realm, and someone who, for the purposes of moral decision making, doesn't trust to commandments or authority, but wants to think for themselves in different contexts what the right thing to do might be based on consideration of human beings and their welfare. And also someone who, in terms of the meaning of life or the meaning of the universe, doesn't think that we live in a place where there is some ultimate purpose or ultimate meaning to reality itself, but that meaning is something that human beings create individually and together in the here and now. So a non-religious approach to life that has those sorts of characteristics is pretty much what the word humanist is used to mean today.
And I should have said, if anyone wants to ask Andrew a question, you can contact us either by commenting. I hope, Hogtie, you've got YouTube open, I've got Vaughan open, or you can send us a Skype message, and we can ask Andrew any questions that you have, within reason, of course. So continuing on from that, Andrew, the British Humanist Association, give us an idea of the sort of work that does and the sort of issues that you try and deal with.
Well, like you say, there's lots of countries in the world that have humanist associations, and in fact all across the world they do very similar types of things. So every humanist association, and the BHA, the British Humanist Association, is no different, has three main planks of work. So the first area of work we have is what you might roughly describe as community services. So in the past, that's included things like housing associations and adoption agencies for non-religious people, at times when those services were mainly run by churches and so non-religious people didn't have access to them. Today, our main service is training celebrants to do non-religious funerals and weddings, which are extremely popular. And we also train people to give moral, sort of pastoral, emotional support to non-religious people in hospitals and prisons. So there's a community services element. There is an educational element, reaching out to people in wider society, as well as in more formal educational settings like schools and colleges and so on, with resources that explain what humanism is, that try to give people who have non-religious approaches to life the confidence to live ethical and fulfilling lives with confidence. So that's extremely important. And then the third part of our work is campaigning advocacy work. So whether it's with government, nationally or locally, whether it's with Parliament, whether it's with public authorities, we work to try and create a secular state where no one is going to be disadvantaged or privileged on the basis of their religious or non-religious beliefs. And that's very important, obviously, in the UK, which is still not a secular state and has lots of religious discrimination and religious privilege in its fabric. And also, in our advocacy and campaigning work, as well as promoting secularism and trying to achieve a secular state, we promote a humanist view on big public ethical issues. So questions like whether or not there should be assisted dying for the terminally ill and the incurably suffering, issues of scientific research where it involves human tissues like stem cell research, and issues like reproductive and sexual health rights. So as well as our secularist work, there's also humanist activism on big public ethical issues. So they're the three main areas. It keeps us very busy.
I'm sure it does, and certainly some of those issues that you've mentioned we're going to come back to in due course. But I thought you'd like to know, as a result of attending my father's funeral at the beginning of this year, my sister has decided, and in fact has gone through the first process of becoming a humanist funeral. Sorry, what was the word?
Celebrant.
Celebrant. Yeah.
Oh, that's excellent. Yeah,
and also, this is another question I was going to ask you, is how is the organisation financed? Because recently, about 6 months ago, I actually signed up to your organisation, and although you probably can't see it, I do have one of the badges that you kindly sent me. Oh, you can't see it now. Good without God.
Oh, right. I know what that one looks like. Yeah.
So yes, you've got one new supporter, but how is it financed? Is it purely through public donations?
We're entirely funded through public donations. That's right. Individual donors and supporters provide 95% of our funding. There's little bits and pieces other ways through legacies or the provision of some merchandise and services, but it's donors and supporters that really are the lifeblood of our financing. And of course, that's going up all the time, which is great.
It's encouraging. What I will also do, if you send me the appropriate link, I'll include it in the video description. So if somebody is minded to support your organisation, hopefully they will do so.
Well, they can do it right while they're listening, couldn't they? Humanism.org.uk.
Say it again.
Humanism.org.uk.
There you go. I'll include it. And I'll include it because not everyone is watching live, but I will certainly include it in the description, and we can sort that out at the end of the program. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with Andrew and the work he does, he does an awful amount of television work, whether it's through interviews and debates and whatever. And Andrew agreed to appear the best part of 5 or 6 months ago, and it has always struck me that he is one of the most calm, controlled and polite people I've ever come across. And I've never seen him angry, even in the face of criticism, harsh questioning on television and whatever. But I did find perhaps 5 seconds, maybe, of where Andrew got a little bit annoyed. And I want to share that with you because it's sort of like is a segue into the next topic we're going to talk about. It should hopefully be the press of a button. And Andrew, if you can't hear this over Skype, if you mute yourself on Skype and listen to it on Vaughan TV, it's about 5 minutes long, and I think I can kind of understand why you got a little bit upset, but let's see how we get on.
Well, just before Christmas, the government quietly dropped the idea of allowing humanists to legally conduct weddings, despite its review finding that a majority of people were in favour of the idea. In Scotland, since humanist weddings were made legal, extremely popular, now more people are choosing marriage over just living together. Great success. Well, now the British Humanist Association is lobbying for humanism to be on the exam syllabus for GCSE, AS and A-levels in religious studies? Should humanists have equal rights to religions? Well, from Discuss Jesus, Taewon, from whom we heard earlier on, we were discussing this just before the programme and talking about, for example, humanist weddings, and you were saying you thought they were demonic.
I do, yeah. I think I do think they're entirely demonic. See, it all goes back to the origins of humanism. Humanism is the cancer of Thanksgiving. It is devil's PR. It is a first-class ticket to the sea of wantonness and debauchery of every form. The reason,
Listen, that's a great thing about this programme. I'm glad, because I hope people are appreciate that we try and give a range of opinions. Listen, tell me, there are plenty of people who agree with you, are there?
I'm sure. There are a number of
free speech.
I like to think that
freedom of speech.
See, the issue with humanism is that it tries to knock God off the throne, and when we look at the Bible talks about Lucifer, whose name is the devil, and his attempt was to ascend to the Most High and sit on both sides of the north and basically replace God. And it's the same spirit, it's the same mindset.
Subverts God, right?
Exactly.
In Scotland, it has bolstered the institution of marriage. You probably won't like this, but there've been pagan weddings. I know, of course, you won't like it.
I mean,
there've been White Eagle Lodge weddings, which is a New Age philosophy. There have been spiritualist weddings, people who talk to the other side, and blah. So,
see, I don't think this is good for society because God instituted marriage. God, based on the Word of God, He brought Adam and Eve together. And so the very historical book which has stood the test of time is the very guideline we ought to follow. And I think humanism is a first-class ticket to the very hypersexualized culture that we're seeing.
Right, Andrew Copson, what is before we cast you out and all your works, what is, I'm serious, what is humanism?
Well, if you're going to go to wantonness and debauchery, I suppose you might as well travel first class. And I think that humanism is, in a genuine sense, more of a first-class worldview than has been depicted. Humanism is the non-religious worldview that, instead of looking to revelation or authority, we look to reason and evidence to understand the universe. Instead of looking to moral rules that come from outside human beings, we look to other human beings to generate values in the here and now, and also to generate meaning in our life. Instead of looking externally for some meaning to give value and sanction to the existence that we're having, a humanist view is that men and women in the course of our lives create and sustain meaning together by giving our lives purpose and a sense of fulfillment. Now, I think that is a very satisfying worldview, a worldview that has made a massive contribution to human progress and achievement. It's a worldview that is held by a very large number of people in Britain, over a third in opinion polls, by many people.
Do you think a lot of those people would not call themselves humanists? They don't know they're humanists.
I think that's a very interesting point of view. I mean, about 50% of people in Britain shows attitudes and beliefs and values, but only about 5% of people call themselves humanists, which is about the same number as... Hold on a minute.
I disagree.
You can't disagree with the survey. A result of a survey is a result, so why don't you just get to choose whether that fact is true or not? And that view, which has made that powerful contribution to human well-being, and motivates, for example, me to sit here politely listening to being called wanton and debauched and trying to interrupt other people is... not on a Sunday morning, is worthy of respect. Now, when it comes to areas of our public common life, like what we learn about in schools, it is right that we should learn about religions and respect other people's points of view, as I would always do and you would not. But if we're learning about that, we should also be learning humanist views. That's my view. And as you say, in Scotland, humanist weddings have been massively popular. Last year, they overtook the Catholic. Did you just say Pol Pot?
Yeah, Pol
Pot. Do you want to go to the list of Christians to millions as well, or are you just going to put out one?
Okay, I want to move from the key.
So there we go. That is about as angry as I've ever seen Andrew Copson get. How do you manage it, Andrew? Because you, as I say, you just maintain such a calm persona most of the time. That's the only time, and it wasn't really a particularly angry outburst, but it's the only time I've seen you sort of like get irate.
That is about as angry as I get, actually. Certainly on television or in these situations. I think it's extremely important actually to be as self-controlled as possible in these situations. I think as non-religious people, we always have to sort of overbehave in terms of courtesy and politeness, because the common idea is that if you're the non-religious person, you're going to be militant, angry, harsh, shouty, and negative. And so I think that one of the reasons why it's important to remain as calm as possible, and what I always try to do, so even though it's extremely difficult sometimes, is that. I mean, I think we've almost got to overcompensate to try and dispel the myths that lots of people have about a non-religious point of view.
There's a little sort of like quiz that I've put together to see whether the Andrew Copson in private is the same as the Andrew Copson in public, and it's just a couple of little questions, and see where we get with them. Do you swear if you stub your toe against a wall?
Yes.
Okay. On a scale of 0 to 10, how much do the following things irritate you? Dropping litter.
Is 10 really, really annoyed?
10 is maximum annoyedness. Yes.
Okay, it's 10. Dropping litter, 10.
Okay, I'm with you on that. Hogtie, you've been quiet so far. Dropping litter?
Oh, we're in on this? Well, I guess 7. Like, let's have some perspective. Let's have some perspective.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't know what's coming next. That's a fair point. I've gone too high too soon.
Well, maybe not. Maybe I'm with you, Andrew. I just think dropping litter is just so unnecessary and so uncaring for the environment. But anyway, okay. On a scale of 0 to 10, what should I pick up next? People telling you that you can't be moral without God.
Oh, I mean, I don't even find that annoying anymore because it's so stupid. So I mean, number one.
That's a 1.
Yeah,
that's a 1.
Do you agree?
That's a 1 because it's a gift. You know how to answer it. You know that they reveal themselves to have an idiotic position. So I'm starting to like it.
I know there's a bit of a lag, but no one in the chat is sort of like offering much here. Your computer crashes when you're halfway through writing a long email and you haven't saved it.
Oh, well, litter annoys me more than that. 5, I think 5.
You give a 5 for that, Hogtie?
Yeah.
Well, annoyance definitely 9 or 10, but yeah, what are we measuring?
Annoyance levels.
I thought you had a different word for it. Because I think the problem there is agency, right? I mean, you don't shake your fist at the sky for the rain. But the litter, I mean, that's somebody doing something on purpose. It wasn't annoyance. That wasn't the word you said, was it?
I can't remember now. Was it annoyance? How angry you get. Angry you get.
You can't be angry at the computer.
Okay. Yeah, well, it's a 9 annoyance, but anger, 4.
Okay, this is something that I don't think you've done, Hogtie Champ, but I imagine you can picture it happening. I know that Andrew has been in a debate, I think at Oxford, with William Lane Craig.
Cambridge. Yeah.
Cambridge, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
How angry or annoying was that experience?
That's a good question. I mean, I'd never heard of him before. And obviously he's seems to be quite prominent online in the United States. And so I was sort of unprepared for his way of operating. I wouldn't say it made me angry, because I genuinely don't think he knows how empty all his arguments are. And I don't think he's doing it sort of deliberately to be tricksy. So I don't think it made me angry. I was slightly bewildered by the fact that he didn't seem to listen to anything else anyone said. And he did have all his stuff sort of pre-scripted. And what he was saying didn't make any sense, but he just rattled along like a sort of broken machine, still doing the same thing again and again, even though other people were sort of providing bumps in the road That's not a very good metaphor or analogy, but you know what I mean. So I don't think it made me angry. I think it's very disappointing, and it's a cause for concern that his arguments seem to be taken seriously by some people, and that he is invited to the sort of forums that he did get invited to when he was visiting the UK. I wouldn't say I felt anger, slight despair, perhaps.
Well, I've studied a lot of William Lane Craig's debates, and even made a number of videos about his debates. And depending on how long he has to speak, he recites either 5 or 7 arguments, and they have remained unchanged ever since he first began.
I was going to say.
And include, for example, the resurrection of philosophical arguments that have been unused for literally thousands of years in some cases. And I'm sure you probably got the Kalam argument.
Cosmological. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I did. I mean, I ignored his arguments, really. Because, and just tried to say why, it was highly improbable that the specific God that he was talking about and the specific gods that various people talk about, are actually real. And he, to be fair, he ignored my arguments too. So, I mean, I suppose we were equally matched. Thankfully, luckily for me, there were professional philosophers there, or academic philosophers there, also involved in the debate, who were able to point out some of his silliness. But it was very silly.
I don't want to dwell on it a great deal, but whenever I hear the Kalam argument being used, I concede both the premises and the conclusion, because I don't think it gets them anywhere. Even though I think the premises can be criticised, the conclusion is merely that the universe has a cause. Now, William Lane Craig then goes through a series of maybe 6 or 7 steps to explain why this cause is a Christian God, and none of it makes any sense to me at all. But whilst we're on this subject, Pol Pot was mentioned to you in the video clip. In the range of arguments for the existence of a God, how did that one rate?
Well, I wasn't sure what the argument was. I mean, what was actually happening? You can't hear on that program. If you're in the studio on that program, you can hear what everyone is saying. But if you're watching it on the television from home, you can only hear what the person that the camera's on is saying. So what he was doing out of your sight there was he was reciting the names of random sort of villains from history, as if to say, well, I don't know what point he was trying to make, but one of them was Pol Pot, and that was the one that really sort of caught me by surprise. I thought Pol Pot was a Buddhist, wasn't he? I mean, I don't know, but I think he was actually.
Wasn't he the chief executive of the Cambodian Humanist Association? I may have that wrong. I'll have to check Wikipedia.
Well, that's the sort of point that guy, on that show was trying to make. I mean, I think he was trying to pick out. What he was trying to do was pick out some people that he was claiming obviously were humanists or were non-religious. I don't think he was right actually about any of them. Well, certainly none of them were humanists, but not even all of them were not religious. And he was trying to say, here you are, the existence of these people who committed atrocities, if they were not religious, would thereby demonstrate that people who are not religious commit atrocities. Well, this is a very silly argument to try and make. And it's very surprising the BBC should give it airtime. But the refutation of it is pretty easy. You do the same thing back and list some very good, beneficent, non-religious people, or some very cruel, atrocious religious people. But none of those examples of individuals says much in isolation about the effect of a person's worldview on their actions. And in fact, there's a considerable amount of evidence from social sciences and psychology that, as we know, that either religion is a relatively neutral factor when it comes to morality and altruism and so on, or that actually religious belief can be a great inhibitor of altruism and of treating other people regardless of their ethnicity and religion and nationality and so on, as you would like to be treated yourself. So in fact, it's a very silly point that he was even trying to make, but he didn't even make it very well, I don't think.
Talking about the effects of religion on morality, I don't know, Hogtie, did you have an opportunity to look at the link that I sent you before?
Yeah, I've seen that study, and it reported in other sources as well.
Let's
a bit of a buzz this week.
Let's bring that up. It'll take me a couple of seconds just to
Is this the study? Is this the study about children?
Yeah. Are you familiar with it?
Yes, I am.
Let me just bring it up on screen for.
I don't think you should refer, because it's very dubious methodologically.
Oh well, we can discuss it anyway.
Well, you don't want to fall into the same trap as other people, do you?
No, I don't. But I know, for example, that Hogtie has had a look at it. He's read it, and it's an area where he has some degree of expertise so far as the stats may be concerned. But let's just do it for fun. And there we go, and hopefully now it should appear on the screen on Vaughan TV, which it does. There we go. So Hogtie, you've had an opportunity to look at this. We can scroll through it. What did you take from it?
Well, you picked the one that probably had the worst title too. The religion makes children more selfish. That is implying that the presence of religion in the home is causal in causing children to be more selfish. I don't know if that's at all what the study demonstrated. But can we nutshell it really quickly? I guess they had a task where they gave these kids these stickers, and they were told they were theirs to keep. And then they said, well, you can, I'm going to turn my back, and you can give some of these stickers, donate them to some other kids that didn't get stickers. That's probably a super brief methodology, but it's really not that much more complicated than that. And then assess the religiosity of the parents or guardians, and they found that those kids that were more religious were sort of more selfish with their stickers. The kids whose caregivers were religious, they were more selfish with the stickers. Whereas the non-religious families, those kids.
I think there were 1,000 people that were tested. But the p-value is something that I was hoping we'd be able to explain, because it obviously is my field.
I would love to do, this would actually be one I would love to use in a class I taught a few years ago, where I was trying to illustrate the difference between what they call statistical significance versus social relevance. So we say there's a significant difference. We found a significant difference between this and that. And the example that I used to use was, suppose there's some drug that they give to pregnant women because it would aid them with some issue they were having, and birth weight. And so you do a placebo comparison. And you look and you go, well, given the standard deviation, you got sort of two distributions that really overlap. We don't really find a significant difference. Well, it doesn't mean the drug is safe, because you tested it on too few people. Most people are quite aware of this problem of low sample size. But then I would show, if let's say you did this 10,000 women and 10,000 placebo, you would find that there would be, so anyway, I just use that as an example to illustrate. There's a really big difference between, if you have a large enough sample size, it's like having a very powerful, very sensitive microscope that you can look and say, well, here's one group and here's another group. And if you look at the means, there's a very slight difference between the means. If you have a large enough sample size, you can resolve those very small differences in means. But at the end of the day, when it comes to a choice of, well, should we prescribe this drug, or should we not let this child into our home because he comes from a religious family and he's probably going to start fires? This is one of those studies where they used enough subjects that to whatever extent there is a difference between the selfishness as assessed by the sticker collection thing. To whatever extent there is that small difference, they used enough subjects that they could resolve this very small difference. But does it really indicate that this group of kids is really awesome and this group of kids is really terrible? I don't think so.
Okay, well, there we go. An issue that we touched upon, Andrew, before the show started was how would you define yourself in relation to calling yourself an atheist? And whilst you do seem to identify yourself as an atheist, you expressed some reservation about describing yourself in that way. What's the reservation?
Well, I don't think I'd say I had a reservation as such. I mean, if I certainly I don't believe in any gods, and I don't believe there's any evidence for any gods, and I don't find the concept of God useful for any practical or other purpose. I suppose. So I certainly, if someone says, "Oh, you're an atheist," I say, "Yes, that's right. I don't believe in any gods." But I think that the word atheist, I think, is inescapably linked to its sort of religious origin. I think that already the word gives too much away to the opposition, as it were. I think that it defines, if we say we're atheists, I'll personalize it. If I said I was an atheist, I would feel that I was sort of describing myself in another person's language, an inappropriate language that I don't even accept the premises of. It's not, I just don't think it's that important for it to be a word that is useful in describing anything interesting or important about my own beliefs. I regard the fact that I don't believe in any gods as being one of the least important things about the various beliefs and values that I have, and so I just wouldn't use it. Now, if the point of comparison is someone who is a theist, then of course the word atheist is extremely important. But I think we should try and move beyond the stage at which our first reference point is theists and theism. And I think in the UK and in other countries in the world, we are reaching the point where we can do that. There is only a minority of people now in the UK who say they believe in God, positively, actively, actually believe in gods of any sort. And I think, given that's the case, it's a very strange thing to tie our self-descriptions to a dead idea. An atheist, I think, is doing that. In other parts of the world, of course, where the theistic view is the dominant and overwhelming one, there may be good tactical reasons, or not even tactical, just sort of people, it's the only word some people might have to describe what they think in contrast with the majority dominant view. But I personally, given the society I grew up in, the family I grew up in, the place I find myself now living in, don't find it a useful or relevant word to describe myself. So that's why I don't use it so much myself.
I tend to, and it's sorry, Hooktai, I'll come to you shortly. I tend to do so because the majority of people that watch this show, and majority of people who join in Google Hangouts with me are from America, and obviously you'll be familiar with the complete difference in attitudes in America, and this is something that I was going to invite you to describe for the sake of people not from this country. I mean, how would you describe the state of religious belief in the United Kingdom at the moment? I mean, you mentioned earlier that it was in a minority, for example.
Yes, well, I mean, there are lots of different ways to measure what sociologists call religiosity. You can measure practice. You can measure things like attendance at places of worship. You can measure beliefs. You can ask people what they believe in surveys and other instruments. And you can ask people, how they identify themselves, where they affiliate, or where they see themselves as belonging. And on all those measures, apart from cultural affiliation, which I'll come to in a moment, on all those measures, the non-religious are the majority in the UK. So certainly in terms of religious practice, over 90% of people now don't attend a place of worship each week. And that is, a pretty substantial proportion. And a very, very small percentage attend a place of worship weekly. I think it's now under 5%. I think it's under 5% now. So certainly in terms of religious practice, formal institutional religious practice, the UK is extremely secular. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that those people who aren't in places of worship don't have religious beliefs and religious identities. many of them do. So that's why it's important to also talk about beliefs and identity. Now, in terms of religious beliefs, in surveys and polls generally, I mean, it depends what questions you ask, obviously, but there would be about 16% of people at the moment in the UK who would agree with conventional Christian beliefs that there is a God, that Jesus existed, and he was the Son of God. That would be about the level of it. So 84% of people don't believe that. So most people's beliefs are non-religious in that sense. You also get a majority for non-religious ways of, if you ask people how do you think about ethical problems, it's always the non-religious answers that dominate. If you ask people how they want to make sense of the universe, it's always the non-religious answers that form the majority. So in belief terms, what's important to you, making sense of the world, making sense of your own values, deciding how to live, people's answers are hugely, overwhelmingly non-religious. And then in terms of identity, it's slightly trickier because although, and again, it depends on what question you ask, which is one of the perils of this sort of research. If you ask people in the UK now, do you see yourself as belonging to any particular religion or denomination, about half of people will say no. So around 50% of people say, no, I don't see myself as belonging to any such group. And that proportion is hugely higher amongst younger people. It can rise to up to 70 or 80% in younger age groups. But it's about 50%, which makes it one of the highest in the world. If you try and pick up a sort of cultural connection to religion rather than a religiosity by asking questions about how people culturally affiliate, then only about 25% of people will say that they don't affiliate to any religion in any way at all. But that's still, of course, a very significant proportion. It is, again, one of the highest in the world. And the long-term trend over the last few decades, which doesn't show any sign of abating and is pretty robust, is for the non-religious in every of those categories to be increasing all the time. So, the UK is a country where social life, moral life, people's own internal universe, people's relations with each other, people's relations to the state is really not governed for the large majority of people by any sort of religious belief.
Hogtie, you're from Canada, obviously. I think we all know that. Are you able to give comparable figures for what's happening in Canada?
Yeah, well, I think we're closer to the trend that you see in the UK than what's happening in the US. But we are still experiencing a bit of what I've referred to on the show as a compression effect. So for Andrew's benefit, and I'm sure you probably are aware of this already, but what we've been seeing is, our country typically has had this very healthy body of people who, as you say, accepted the general beliefs of Christianity. There's God, there's Jesus, the Bible's an important book, and so forth. But when they go to make decisions, when you ask them for their basis, like about, well, should we still have the death penalty debate we had here 40 years ago, they don't really cite religious reasons or seek scriptural support in how to make choices in your own daily life and how governments ought to proceed in making choices. That's really been the biggest group. And of course, it's been deflating considerably as people have fallen away from the core beliefs about God and Jesus and reverence for the Bible. But at the same time, some of those people that want to hold on to those beliefs, or their children, I guess the message of radical evangelical Christianity has started to catch on. We see it much more in the States, but you get a little bit more of it here in Canada. But yeah, you're seeing a deflating of that big core. More and more people identifying as not affiliated with a church. Well, ask them the question directly, do you believe in God? Those numbers are going down steadily. But when you look at that last category, the extremists, the radicals that take these views, for example, biblical inerrancy or young earth creationism, their numbers are actually going up slightly. And it's not a remarkable increase in their numbers, but it's in the context of all the other religiosity numbers dropping. It's surprising that it's holding at all and actually slightly increasing. The one I thought that immigration was a big factor in some of this too, because I believe that a significant number of immigrants to the UK, and not nearly as much to Canada, are Muslim populations. and they kind of tend to import and hold on to Islamic beliefs rather than embrace Christianity in any way, or to be atheists. I don't know if it's the case.
Yeah, there's I mean, the extent of the increase in non-Christian religions in the UK can be exaggerated, and if you ask people what they think the percentage is, they come up with much higher figures than the actual percentage of people who are Muslim in the UK. And the last census in 2011 showed it was just under 5% of people who describe themselves in that weak cultural affiliation as Muslim. The data on how far those people are actually religious, how far they actually have religious beliefs, how much they practice their religion, and how far they genuinely affiliate with the religion of Islam rather than the cultural identity of Muslim, is at a very early stage in the UK. So we don't entirely know, but we do have evidence on non-white ethnic groups' religious identity in their first, second, and third generation of immigration, and that's interesting. What you find is as you suggest, that whereas Black and Afro-Caribbean religiosity declines quite substantially from the first to the third generation of immigrant populations, subcontinental and especially Pakistani and the other ethnicities that are strongly associated with Islam, they also decline. Religiosity does decline. Religious self-identity does decline in the third generation as compared with the first, but not by nearly as much. So as you imply, religious identity, at least, whether it's beliefs and practices, I don't know, but religious identity does seem so far in the last three generations of sort of immigrant populations or their children and grandchildren does seem to have persisted quite successfully. So it remains to be seen whether or not the same forces of secularization that have created the shift in people whose grandparents were Christian turning out to be non-religious in the UK. It remains to be seen as to whether or not that will also hold true for those populations, at least on the ethnic level. I think that's going to be quite interesting, to put it mildly, for the next few decades.
Can I touch back on the point about?
Sorry, Hogtie, do go on, Hogtie.
I wanted to touch back on the point about DPR had asked you about using the word atheism and your sort of hesitance in doing so. I will say just in passing that I don't. I describe myself online. My Hogtie Champ online persona is an atheist, but I don't tell people in my own country that I'm an atheist. Because of the energy and the charge that word has. And it's not nearly as bad here as in the US. It's almost a swear word in the US some places. And I apologize that you reacted a bit there when I said your hesitance to use the word atheism. Was I mischaracterizing it a little bit, or?
No, I was reading the comments on the side from
okay.
Sorry.
Oh.
I was multitasking.
Andrew, if there's anything that you want to address in the comments, please feel free to do so.
Okay, maybe I will remember. I think hesitance, though. Yes, to come back to that, I wouldn't. It's not hesitance. It just doesn't come up. I mean, I struggle to think of a scenario in my daily life where, well, apart from when I'm at work, obviously, when it comes up quite often. If I'm talking to religious, or even then, it doesn't really come up because people know already what I believe. It says it on my job description. But I can't think of a social situation at home or in the workplace or in, out in the world where it comes up, really.
I'll give you that.
Yeah. So
here. Yeah, I shouldn't say I don't use it because I'm fearful of using it, I guess, here. I mean, here it's only the case that if you're like people don't like the militants, what they call militant atheism. Like, why would you want to take people's belief away from you? But yeah, no, you're right. I mean, for the most part, it just doesn't really come up. I think we're agreed as sort of a pocket of people that are more extremists that are really concerned about it. The thing I wanted to ask you about, though, is that when you were describing that before about how the term atheist is a little bit charged, it has some baggage. My first question for you, actually, that the audience member you were speaking with on the show kind of asked it for me. Do you not find that the word humanist is similarly charged? I was going to ask you, what does the word humanism mean? Does it mean you're trying to knock God off the throne? That's literally what the guy had asked you.
Yes, he's right. I mean, that is what it means. historically, definitely the use of the word means that very much. I mean, the word humanism first came into the English language, at least in terms of Britain, in the 19th century from the German humanismus. The word humanist is in the English language for a lot longer, but it meant something a bit different. But the word humanism first came to us from German in the 19th century, and straight away was used to mean two quite separate things. One, it was used to describe the culture of the Renaissance. So put that to one side, because that was a very specific, historical usage. And second, it was used to describe any approach to life, really, any worldview that sought to make human beings the center of our moral considerations, our questions about, life, meaning, and morality. These days, of course, I hope that we'd extend that centrality of human beings to quite a lot of other animals as well. But at that point, certainly human beings were the focus. And I think that's right. I think it does, in the context that word was being used and the people it attracted were working in the context of a very, at least officially, Christian society. I think trying to pull the concept of God from its throne was exactly what the word humanism was meant to achieve. So very much so. This is very interesting to me. I'd like to discuss this, but there's a question that keeps coming up on the side things.
Sure. Address it. Do you want to read it out and then?
It's just that some people have been asking what I meant when I said the percentage of people who identify as Christian in the way of cultural association. So there are quite a few questions about that. So the best approach to this is to go onto the Office for National Statistics website and download their briefing about what the census question in England and Wales on religion leads to in terms of results. So there's a good paper there by a demographer called David Vos, that's Voas, and he writes about how you ask a question that forces a religious response. So if you just straight go up to someone in the UK and say, what is your religion? Many people who have no religious beliefs, who never go to church, who, if you ask them, did they belong to a religion, would say no. Many people will say Christian. And if you then, and that's what the census question reveals. And if you then ask those people, as qualitative research projects did post the census, if you then ask those people why they said Christian in response to that forced question, they will say things like, I was Christian, or my parents were Christian, or I celebrate Christmas, or, some sort of loose cultural sort of association that they have that guided that response. So, and that question, what is your religion, that forces that response, which may be highly governed by culture, is conventionally taken to be a measure not of religiosity as such, but of cultural affiliation to a particular religion. And I'm using the example of Christianity, but the same would be true of many people who responded Jewish, many people who responded Sikh, in fact, and at a lower level, many people who responded Muslim. People who responded Muslim didn't believe in God, never went to any place of worship, but had a cultural affiliation with that religious identity. So that's what that means.
Thank you for that.
Okay. On humanism, I want to keep talking about it. If that wasn't a complete answer to the question what humanism is.
Well, if you're
I
happy
can
to
sharpen
keep
the
an eye,
question a bit.
yeah, but if you're happy to keep an eye on the comments as well. Unfortunately, the glasses that I'm wearing now are all right for this screen, but I really struggle to actually read what's being posted on the Vaughan screen, which is over there. So if you pick up on anything that you would like to comment about, please do so. And I just remind people I do have Twitter open, so if you want to pose a question through Twitter to Andrew or Hogtie, you can do it that way as well. It's at which is capital THE GPR Jones. and as I say, I have that open. Sorry, Hogtie, I think you wanted to carry on.
Yeah, what I was hoping to do, and Andrew, your answer, I think, kind of, you didn't give me the answer I expected. I've been telling people that humanism, because what I deal with a lot is evangelical Christians, the more extremists, who will criticize humanism, and there's just a whole bunch of these terms that cloud together: atheist, militant atheist, strident, baby eating, humanist. Like in their minds, those words all a Satanist. They put all those things together. Satanist is the same thing. And I try to explain to them on occasion that humanism comes up. And I'll even tell them I don't necessarily even really know what humanism is. I'm not a member of any humanist organization or anything. But my understanding is that humanism is about the choices, ethical decisions, about a framework for understanding reality, mostly about what are we doing here? Like these choices that we make as individuals, as cultures, as the entire human population. And it's really orthogonal to religiosity. That in the same way that, like if we tried to form a chess club, we shouldn't have somebody come up and say, "Oh, well, you're trying to put chess in front of God," right? We can play chess in a world in a fashion that gives glory to God, right? Chess is part of the universe that God made for us. So when you can be religious and play chess, I have no problem with that. Can you not be religious and also be a humanist? Is what I normally tell people.
Oh, really? Well, I mean, no one owns any word, I suppose. So, I mean, I suppose people could use the word. There has, in fact, been in North America, there has been historic usage of the word humanism to mean something a little bit more broader than it's been used to mean in the UK since it came into the English language. And in the last few decades, you've seen people trying to use phrases like Christian humanism or Islamic humanism and so on to try and sort of co-opt those nice bits of the worldview in terms of morality, concern for people, concern for universal human dignity, and so on. Well, I think that's probably a good thing for humanity if it makes people better. But I think it can lead to problems of conceptual understanding. I mean, I suppose someone could theoretically, I suppose, believe in a God, but also believe that God was not the source of morality, and didn't, color the universe, and we should still use science to understand the universe right up until, in every way. And the God in question had laid no moral obligations on us. It was still up to us to find values, and that the God hadn't put any meaning in the universe. It was still on us to make meaning, and so on and so forth. I suppose someone could believe that, but you might legitimately ask what the point of that God, what that God did do, and why they did exist. But I suppose if some.
Well, I understand what they would claim. Again, these are not religious radicals that would make this claim. It is their view is that
and there's a big overlap in values, obviously, between almost all people of any sort of liberal inclination, and that's not surprising because we're all human beings, and our values come from our social instincts and our life in communities, which are share more than they have more in common than they differ. So I guess that's fair enough. But I think it's in order to keep sort of our descriptions of people and their beliefs sort of sharp and useful. I think it would be better to talk in terms of the ways that humanist values might overlap or be shared by or with the values of some people who identify with Christianity, some people who identify with Islam, some people who identify with other ways of looking at the world, and so on.
I think that kind of segues into one of the many topics, and I know, Andrew, that you thought you were signing up for 8 till 9. We're approaching 9. If we can indulge your presence a little bit further, that would be absolutely fantastic. As I say, there are a host of other topics I would love to discuss with you. So if you could stay with us a little bit longer, that would be great.
Of course.
But your previous statement kind of segues a little bit, I think, into one of the questions that I had for you, which is, do you think that the world would be a better place without religion?
That's a very difficult question. By religion, you mean sort of all the things that we call religions now, not just the modern monotheisms of Judaism and Christianity and Islam, including Buddhism and Jainism and Hinduism. And
I prefer to stick with Christianity because that's the one
Oh,
that
that's-
I'm familiar with. But
not
I think that we can't ignore the fact, and it's again something that we touched upon very, very briefly before the show started. We can't be ignorant of the fact that the atrocities that were committed in Paris a couple of days ago seem to be purely religiously based. And I also, as I explained to you, I said that I think that for a lot of people, more moderate believers, theists, religion can be a useful we factor for them to do what they perceive to be good things, and I certainly wouldn't disagree with that. But it seems that if we're going to be stuck with religion, it looks as if we're going to be stuck with fundamentalist religion as well.
Right. Well, I mean, of course, I think it would be a better, safer, healthier world if everyone were a rational, non-religious humanist. Of course, I think that's the case. I think, though, that and if that's the limits of this thought experiment, then I will say yes. I think in the ways I've just described, the security and peace and stability and health of the world and the human population, then I think yes, it would be better off. We would be better off without religions. Of course, it would also subtract from the world a considerable amount of interest, given that diversity is interesting, and different views are always interesting on different topics. But hopefully, we'd have enough still to disagree about. Life wouldn't lose its interest as a result of losing religion. So that's good. If you were to cast this thought experiment back in time, I think the answer might be slightly different, because I think that at different times in the history of humanity, either as a whole or in its smaller subdivisions, populations, communities, religions have provided they've provided vital social glue and cohesion that have the human communities to survive. And I think that you can't replay history and find out if without those religions things would still have been okay. But maybe they wouldn't have been. So I think it'd be too much of a risk to press given if such a thing were possible, you're invited to press the button that would delete religion through the whole of human history, not just in the present day. Then you might want to think twice about it, given its cohesive effect, especially on small, struggling human populations in ancient and prehistory. But probably those populations would have found other ways to stick together and to be cohesive and to find a reason to go on and reasons to be hopeful and so on and so forth. So I think, yes, I think overall I would say that the net contribution of at least those monotheistic religions, the modern religions of the Middle East, the three that we're talking about, I think their net effect on humanity has been more negative. And I would probably, if I were in a position to rerun human history, probably try to push it in a direction that would avoid those developments and perhaps maintain more of the cosmopolitan, free-thinking attitude of the ancient world in which those religions found root, rather than the more restrictive, life-denying, anti-human principles that those religions have diffused through quite a lot of our culture.
Hogtie, before I come to you, I'm aware that people are messaging me on Skype, and if I open up the message box, I'm going to lose the pair of you on the screen. So I'm going to remove you briefly from the screen. You will still be being heard, but I just want to see what people are actually messaging me. So It'll take me perhaps 30 seconds to do this, but Hogtie, do carry on.
Where did my mind wander to there? I was going to ask if you're a Star Trek fan. The episode where Picard is able to go back in time and avoid the fight with the Nausicaan and not get stabbed in the chest. It was called Tapestry.
Yeah.
Are you a Star Trek fan, Andrew?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I love the laughs as he's stabbed, as he sees the knife and he thinks, oh, it's going to be okay after all.
One of the best episodes. It's a beautiful ending. DPR doesn't know what we're talking about because he's one of these guys that often mix up Star Trek and Star Wars. He's not really into that stuff. But yeah, I mean, obviously, the question about whether human history would have been different had we not taken the paths of these theistic religions. I mean, it's kind of a moot point. I even think the question about what should we do about it today is a bit of a moot point because we don't have our hand on that lever.
Quite.
Right? I mean, right? Like, I think we can't just decide that we'd be better off if we just got rid of this religion thing. So how do we go about doing that? And I certainly don't consider it as a goal of mine to try to figure out how to remove religion. I think the issue is that you got to replace it with something. I like your description up front of humanism about a culture that makes decisions. I used to use the term evidence-based policy in practice. I think that that's the way a culture should evolve, is to take a look at what the evidence says. So for example, if like the abstinence-only education, this is a really big thing in the States, right? Where so that's probably a good idea to tell 14-year-olds they shouldn't be having sex because 14-year-olds shouldn't be having sex. But what happens when you tell 14-year-olds they're not supposed to be having sex? They got chlamydia before they're 16.
Yeah.
Right. So that's what the evidence tells us. And I don't know what you think Jesus would tell us or anything else. It turns out not to really matter. So I think the focus really has to be on increasing people's enthusiasm for evidence-based decision making and not worrying so much about whether or not they believe in a fable, because hopefully the fables will dispel once they're sort of thinking clearly. But
yeah, I mean, I think that's exactly right. And abstinence-only sex education is a really good example because it does lead to precisely the opposite consequences, as you say, precisely the opposite consequences to those that its proponents claim to want. STIs, pregnancy, not to mention the psychological damage, the shame, and all that sort of stuff. So I absolutely agree with you. I think that evidence-based policy and practice would be a hallmark of a humanistic culture, and indeed in those places in the world where humanist values are most widespread, we see that evidence-based policy is also in government and public authority circles most widespread too. But I think that we still have to answer another sort of question, which is evidence and being data-driven in terms of our policy and practice is how we can do something. But we still have to decide what we want to do, and why. So you still have to say, we don't want children to be contracting STIs and be unsafe. Why not? Well, because we want people to be healthy, humans to flourish, people to be happy, people to be fulfilled, people to have a good shot at life in the one chance that we think they're going to get. And I think that is equally where the humanist approach has to come in, setting the aims, the ends, the goals for public policy, as much as setting the rational evidence-based means by which we might achieve those ends. And I think that that's something that we don't think about as much, at least in the West, because a small H humanistic approach has influenced even the Christian institutions that we live with. It is no longer as in fashion in Christian circles to beat yourself up and live in filth and squalor and deny yourself all earthly pleasures and cut your genitals off to avoid sexual temptation and all those other sorts of things. It's much more likely now that Christians and other people from religions in the West will adopt humanistic ends about actually being fulfilled in this world and in this life rather than as well as in the hereafter. And I think that the fact that those religions have become humanized in that way over the centuries blinds us to the fact that that was an important process which has still not played out in other parts of the world. And I think it needs to. And I think that the humanist approach can be helpful in showing us what sort of attitude could be encouraged to bring that about in other parts of the world. There are still parts of the world where even at a state level, well, states only care about power, so that's not such a good example. Even at an official level, the idea of what human life should be and what public authorities should do to shape human life is governed not by fulfillment and happiness and flourishing in this world, but by the dictates of some external deity, and that life can be nasty, brutish and short in this world. We can kill others and kill ourselves and don't need to worry about it, because actually there's another life to come and this life is irrelevant. And I think that we forget actually for how long Europe too laboured under that idea of what the ends of human life should be. And in fact, it's been thoroughly humanised now, and that's all to the good. But we shouldn't forget that the factors that caused that were those humanist factors of valuing the individual person in the here and now and not looking beyond this world for benefits and rewards. And that's what we continue to need to remember too, I think, not just the rational means, but the humanistic ends.
It kind of leads around to another question. Sorry, Hogtag, if I may just go first on this one. It kind of leads on to another question I had for you, which is an often heard criticism that I get when I talk about atheism and this life being the only one that we have, that I, in some way, am removing hope and desire and whatever. I'm sure you've heard that sort of argument before. I mean, how do you respond to that?
Is this a question for me? Sorry, I missed
yes,
it.
Yes, for you.
Well, I think it's very strange. And it's a very strange argument that people should make. I mean, the idea that somehow the fact that life ends makes it not worth living. I mean, we don't feel like that about almost anything else. We don't feel like that about a novel. Or a cake, or any other of the sort of bounded episodes of our existences. If a cake went on forever or a book went on forever, it'd be awful. It would be a complete denial of the purpose.
I have to say, I
book or a cake.
I don't know what your view is, but I don't find the promise of an eternal life, afterlife, to be particularly attractive, because I can't see how it could possibly be enjoyable.
No, I think that's right. Well, what sense could we even make of it? Sort of, disembodied, cut off from everything that gives us sensation and pleasure in the existence that we understand now. I mean, it becomes totally different. We can't even really conceive of it. And life has a certain shape. It is bounded. It begins with birth. It ends with death, and that gives it structure. And we really do rely on that to live, to adopt meaningful goals, to have really even a meaningful sense of self as we develop in our own lives too. So the idea that this is sort of a brief episode in an infinity takes away so much that makes us human, even the very sense of ourselves, that it's meaningless. It's almost meaningless. It would also be incredibly annoying. I mean, I heard Philip Pullman, the novelist, talk about this once, and he said just how, he said in a sort of exasperated tone, how annoyed he would be if he died and then found himself still hanging around. It's an incredibly exasperating idea.
Yeah. Well, I find it not necessarily a good investment of my mental energies to try to decide whether or not I would enjoy heaven. I would think that if the God they tells us exists, I'm sure he would figure it out. He would be able to alter us in a way so that we would enjoy bliss forever. There's actual scriptural support for that position. But my point is, it doesn't matter whether you would like it or not. If God has a chosen fate for you, that's what you're going to get. Maybe you're going to be in hell. Maybe you don't want that, right? It's not up to you to decide whether you'd like it or not. If God exists, it's going to be that way. What I think about is what is the evidence that either of those fates are plausible or worth considering about, right? They always tell you, oh, well, we're trying to warn you about hell because, well, suppose you were in the street and there was a truck coming to hit you. I would want you to avoid that fate. Okay, well, there's a truck. You've got some evidence of that. And of course, there's discussion of what heaven or hell would be like. I think given that it's all one generation after another sort of just forges these things together. And as near as I can tell, none of that stuff exists. It does exist, as you say, you have this sort of package of a life, birth to death, and increasing responsibility and mentorship throughout. And as we go along, we encounter more people that are younger than us that will have to take over custody as we weave through our lives and move on to die. And we need to educate those people about what to do when we give them the keys. Right? Those are things that you think that believers and non-believers would agree on. It's an important priority. But we actually, there was a story that came out on Pathos this week of some Christian homeschoolers that don't do any homeschooling for their kids because they believe that the rapture is coming within a couple of years. So why teach your kids math? Why would you teach your kids math if they're just going to get raptured up next week? It's a legitimate problem.
Just an example of mental cruelty, perhaps. I think.
Well, it's not only mental cruelty. It's also this obsession that many Christians have, and I don't know whether other religions can be tarred with the same brush, but their desire for the end days is something that I just find absolutely bizarre. I presume it's because they think that there's going to be the return of Christ and whatever. I don't understand it. And I'm acutely aware of the time. There's so many different topics I want to briefly rush through, if I may, before you leave us. There's another news story that came out, and again, as we were discussing before, you studied classics at Balliol College in Oxford, and one of the questions I said that I may propose to you is, given your studies and your learning, do you think that the Bible is a accurate historical document?
Absolutely not.
And this segues somewhat into my next little, hopefully, hang on, I need to close that. Are you familiar with the Adulterer's Bible?
Oh, is this the Bible that was misprinted?
Yeah.
Hence, rather naughty advice by accident.
And for some reason, it went to me to open it.
Oh dear.
Hang on. I'll get there. Don't worry.
Well, shall I talk about the Bible while you do? I mean, I think
yeah, please do.
The whole idea that the Bible even might be a reliable historical text, I think, is laughable. And I think that if we hadn't had century upon century of sort of self-reinforcing scholarship that sought to demonstrate that this was the case, or took it for granted that this was the case, if we really pare the sources down to what they're really capable of bearing, what they're capable of telling us, vast majority of both what we call the Old Testament and what we call the New Testament is incredible. So no, I mean, I always find it really. You mentioned what I studied when I was an undergraduate, and that's true. I was a classicist, and obviously, ancient history is an very important part of that. Yeah, I've especially that perspective found it incredible that people would respect a collection of claims like the Bible, especially intelligent people who would apply quite different tests of evidence to historical claims. And I think actually that history, even more than science, I think, can be the greatest solvent of people's belief in individual religions. I think that, it's a big gamble that Christianity and Islam both make, that they can convince you on the basis of their documents alone that this worldview is correct, that God is there, that he said these things, that he did these things, that these things happened. It's a very big gamble they've taken. Now, for a very long time, in the different countries where they've been very powerful and the parts of the world where they've originated, the gamble hasn't seemed so dangerous because they've controlled the reins of power. They've controlled the academic institutions that might have challenged their claims. They've controlled the state, which might have created the Six-Week Booker Challenge. They've controlled the flow of information by destroying alternative texts. Sometimes the majority of texts in the past have been alternative texts destroyed. But I think, and a lot of that paid off. But I think the gamble now has become, the odds have turned against them, because they no longer control the flow of information. If texts that contradict the Bible are dug up in the desert, as they so often are these days, or texts that contradict the Quran are dug up in this place or that place, or things are carbon dated that demonstrate the falsehood of the claims that lie within sacred texts. When these things happen these days, Christianity and Islam is no longer in a position of temporal power such that it can suppress and destroy these new facts. These facts come out and they join all the other facts from disciplines that they haven't even got a hope of controlling, like science and its associated disciplines. So I think that over time, the study of history, ability to verify or otherwise the claims made about the past, will be even an even greater challenge to religions than they currently are. I mean, after all, this is what really turned the tide against Christianity in Europe in the 19th century, I think. Not solely the revolution that Darwin's theories provoked, but also the new historical criticism of the Bible that began to make it evident to vast swathes of the public for the first time that this was a composite text, contingent, unreliable in certain ways, falsifiable in parts. And I think that example of how that helped to lead to the collapse of Christianity in Europe will also increasingly come to be the case in relation to the Quran and its associated texts for Islam.
Yeah, and I apologise. I've had open on the screen a clip from a website which is fitted in it quite entirely. But thou shalt commit adultery. Yeah, and I'm somewhat reluctant to try and scroll down, but for people that are unaware, this was a Bible that was published, I think, in the early 1600s, and there were maybe 1,000 or so of these Bibles that were published. It went unnoticed for a while, but then whoever the king was at the time, and again, without scrolling down, and I don't want to do that in case I lose the image, demanded that all of the 1,000 copies of the Bible that were printed that contained this hideous commandment, which made it known as the sinners or the adulterers' Bible. A few of them actually still survive, and one of them went on auction on the 11th of November of this year, and I'm just curious to know how much you think it sold for.
£50,000.
Okay, Hogtie? Anyone in the chat want to put forward an idea?
I thought it was 90,000. Was it pounds or?
Oh, gosh.
No, I think it was $90,000, wasn't it? US? I don't recall what the unit was.
It was. I have to say, I thought it was going to be a great deal. It was only £31,250, which is about $50,000.
There you go.
But I thought it would go for more, but it I mean, the reason I bring it up is because, and this goes back to what we were talking about the accuracy of the Bible. There was a simple mistake made, and it's a mistake made because the Bible was written by man, not divinely inspired by God. Mistakes happen. The poor printer ended up in terrible trouble as a result. Anyway, that was a little side. Andrew, I want to talk very, very quickly, if we can, about the issues that the British Humanist Association are working on at the moment.
Question in the
sure. If you want to address it, yeah.
No, I just people are obviously quite persistent, especially someone called Helena Handbasket and Bert Poole, asking about humanism. Is it right to go back to that for a moment?
Yes, of course you can.
Yeah, and there's a question here about whether I've noticed a reluctance amongst like-minded people to call themselves, she is Kristen, this one, whether I've noticed a reluctance amongst people with humanist values to call themselves a humanist. I think that's a very interesting question, because I think it goes to the heart of questions of belief and identity that do actually disadvantage non-religious lobby groups in society today quite a bit. So it's definitely the case that a much smaller percentage of people describe themselves as humanists than have humanist beliefs and values. Now, we talked about polls and surveys earlier. If you, the Ipsos Mori did a survey 5 or 6 years ago where they asked people their beliefs on certain moral and scientific questions, not specifics, but things like, where do you think morality came from? What do you think morality is? How do you decide what's right and wrong? How do you decide what's true and false? And so on and so forth. There was sort of what they called a humanist answer to each question, and a few non-humanist answers to those questions. And over 60% of people chose the humanist answer to the individual questions, each of the individual questions. About 36% of people chose the humanist answer in every case. So that would indicate that that sort of proportion of people in the UK held humanist beliefs. However, only 5% of people in the UK call themselves humanists. Well, I think this has the explanation for those two facts is I think, well, there are multiple explanations. One, of course, is that not many people have heard of the term. Only about 23% of people in England and Wales and 50% of people in Scotland know what the word humanist means. So if you don't even know the word, you're not very likely to apply it to yourself. And I think that's a large part of it. I think, experience of humanist organisations is that when many people who do have humanist beliefs and values first learn of the existence of the word, they sort of embrace it and think, this is what I had thought all along. Now, that explains part of it. The second part, and I think the part that the question is in your little screen here, the perspective they're coming from, is those people who know the word, know what it means, are familiar with the concept of humanism and the word humanist, but still feel uncomfortable about applying it to themselves. And I think there are many reasons for that. Not many people with these sorts of beliefs and values we're talking about are that attached to labels, to identity labels. And I think that many of the beliefs and values that constitute humanism are sort of, by definition, free-thinking beliefs and values, and people who hold them might be less willing than people who conform to authorities and other structures to actually give themselves a label, affiliate themselves with a category, assign themselves to a tribe or whatever. So I think that can be a big part of it. And then other people have sort of other minor problems with the idea, one way or another, largely cosmetic. You get a category of people who say, I can never call myself a humanist because, it only says human, and I think that other distinct creatures are just as important, or, whatever. So I think that describes at least a few of the reasons why people don't identify that way. Probably every person has their own personalised reason if they choose not to use the term about why they choose not to.
It's interesting to hear you describe the one reason as that generally the people for whom humanism is appealing, they don't embrace labels. And hearing you say that really resonates with me. I know a lot of people like that okay, for example, we will sometimes discuss, are you a feminist? Well, so many people say, well, I agree with everything they say, but I wouldn't call myself a feminist. Well, how could you do that? Helena and Bert were the two that were pushing for you to ask that question, and she'd even said, in there that I hesitate. I'm reluctant, and yet I hold the values Andrew described. And I think humanism is very much like that. Where, okay, do you want to know my position on women's rights? Well, then ask some questions about women's rights, and I'll tell you. Whereas for other groups, it's very important that you adopt the label, right? That you put on the uniform. If you're a Christian, then you tell people you're a Christian. Right? That's the first thing that you got to put out there to tell people about. And it's interesting just to hear you say that, because I think that really resonates with a lot of people. That we tend to be the same people who aren't really interested in putting on a uniform and saying, well, this badge or hat or whatever is exactly what you can know about my entire position on everything based in this one word.
I think that I mean, I agree with you absolutely, and I feel that myself. You know, ironically, I run a humanist organisation, which is all about, you know, increasing public understanding of the fact that this word exists and means what it means. But I agree very much, and I feel it even myself. But I think that actually we might be having a very selfish feeling there. I think that can be quite a selfish attitude, because if we accept, and I really do think this is true, that the more people use words like this, positive words to denote beliefs and values that many people have, the more people that associate with this cause, with this movement, with this idea, then the more people who currently don't even have the luxury of thinking, oh, do I want to use this word, these beliefs, because they've never even heard of the beliefs and values, trapped within, you know, religious structures, religious systems, religious societies, and they can see no way out of it. People who have non-religious beliefs but just feel no confidence in them at all, because everything around them has been telling them these beliefs are second best, these beliefs are a failure, these beliefs are, you know, a blasphemy, these beliefs are a heresy, these beliefs are a problem. You know, if we want to help to give those people confidence to understand that there's an alternative way of living, a better way of living, and a way that has inspired and the life stance of some of the biggest contributors to human welfare throughout time and across the world, then I think we may be letting other people down if we don't take this label on, you know, understand it and promote it and so on. We have the luxury of sort of thinking, oh, I couldn't quite identify this way. If our identity and what we say about it is only important to us and very precious to ourselves alone. But I think can be a very decadent position to take up. And if we think about our responsibility to other people, we might find, if we're convinced that the use of a certain word, the promotion of it, and it's being known as a way to help those people, we might, well take it on ourselves for their benefit. And I think I'm not saying I completely agree with that either, although I think I do. But I think it might provide a case that offsets personal discomfort with some idea of how you could join in for a common good and to help others by labelling yourself in this way.
Do you think it's a PR problem? No criticism of you, but if people don't understand the word, they're not likely to identify with that word. So,
of course that's right. Of course that's right. I mean, I mentioned earlier the fact, and this is interesting. Well, I think, you know, we've got a real problem actually in humanist organisations and many non-religious, you know, similar organisations, not just the ones that actually call themselves humanist, in that humanist organisations have been around for about 100 years, right? That's nothing in terms of the timescale that other organisations that have had time to promote their ideas, you know, convince people and so on have been around. So I think that we've got a lot of catching up to do. After centuries of being persecuted and killed, you know, there's quite a lot of work to be done. We're not as well endowed with money. We're not as well endowed. We've got a lot of very bright people in our cause and on our side, of course, and a wider public which can be very sympathetic to our views. But in terms of getting the word out there, getting the idea out there, in the sense that you just asked about, we are arriving pretty late to the party. In Scotland, as I said a moment ago, in Scotland, public understanding of what humanism is over 50%. In England and Wales, it's over 20%. I think it's about 23 or 24%. I think that's very interesting, because one of the ways in which Scotland is different from the rest of the UK is that they've got legal humanist marriages. So I think, as in many other countries in the world, like Norway and parts of the United States and so on and so forth. So I think that we can learn from humanist organisations around the world what works in terms of getting the word understood and heard, and so on and so forth. Maybe we get more into sort of not onto people's doorsteps, obviously, but into their lives in different ways. Use sort of different ways of making them aware of what humanism is. Make sure they come into contact with humanist organisations in the course of their living in society. Then that's probably going to bear fruit. Having said that, maybe 23% isn't bad for people knowing what it is, at least in a country where the levers of media and of power overwhelmingly belong still to establishment, and in many cases very Christian sources.
Well, okay. I'm acutely aware of the time, and I really appreciate the generosity that you're giving us. But it leads me on to another question, which is, and this comes from just looking at the British Humanist Association website, and the top issues that seem to be those that you're working on at the moment. And one of them is the issue of having bishops in the House of Lords. Now, again, the majority of the audience, I suspect, is from America. So perhaps you can explain a little bit about the background of the House of Lords, and in just a couple of sentences.
Yeah.
I'm sure you'll be able to do it.
It seems pretty crazy, doesn't it, and a little bit sort of Hogwarts. But yes, the Parliament of the United Kingdom has in its second chamber, so it's equivalent of a Senate, which is called the House of Lords, 26 bishops of the Church of England, who are there originally because the church owned so much land that its bishops sat in Parliament as landowners. But since the 19th century, they are there as representatives of the state religion. Because in the UK and in England, though not in Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales, there is a state religion, a state church, and that is the Church of England. The head of state, the monarch, must always be a member of the Church of England, and the Church of England has 26 representatives as of right in our national parliament. Pretty bizarre situation, especially given that at most only 16% of people in the UK are actually members of the Church of England. So they're a minority of Christians, not just a minority. Generally, they're not even most Christians are members of the Church of England. So that's the situation. And of course, bishops are not only representative of a minority, they are not even representative of their own members' views. So, for example, 70% of members of the Church of England think that we should legalise assisted dying for the terminally ill, but all of the bishops, 100% of the bishops, voted against that point of view when it was debated in Parliament. So there's all sorts of reasons. They're obvious, really. I mean, it seems almost...
I mean, just so we're clear, these are totally unelected.
Yes, all members of the House of Lords are unelected. That's another peculiarity of the upper house of the UK Parliament. All members of the House of Lords are unelected. A small proportion of them are there by heredity, because their great-great-great-great-grandfather did the king a favour or something. And the majority of them are there by appointment, either because a political party has appointed them to represent its interest in the second chamber, or because they've been appointed by an independent appointments commission because they've made some significant contribution to British public life, and so they get appointed for that really as experts. So it's an entirely appointed chamber of our parliament, and the bishops are there as that part of that.
And it segues sort of like quite nicely into the next topic that I wanted to discuss, which is what we discussed on the previous show when you were last here, which is the case of Tony Nicholson.
Yeah.
And assisted dying, which is and was at the time illegal. It remains illegal.
Yeah.
A criminal offence. Again, just to give us background before we move on to what's happened subsequent to that. Give us a background to the Tony Nicholson case.
Yeah. Well, it will also be interesting to hear from Hogtie about Canada as well, which of course has made considerable progress in assisted dying over the last couple of years. Well, in the UK, yes, you're right. The last time we spoke, the last time I was going to show we were supporting the case of Tony Nicklins. He was a man with locked-in syndrome, so he'd had a very severe sporting accident, and he'd become almost incapable of movement, and had what's called locked-in syndrome, where his body wasn't responding to his will. And he decided that life had reached such a condition that he no longer had any, pleasure or fulfillment from it. It was worse to live than to end his life, in his opinion. He went to court to try and argue that the state shouldn't interfere if he wanted to have assistance in ending his life. Technical grounds on which he launched that case, his right as an individual to privacy, to live his own life as he wished, if he wasn't harming others, and to have assistance in achieving his desires where he couldn't achieve them himself. So
I think also, Andrew, if I just interrupt you very briefly, he was so locked in and so incapable of controlling his body and doing anything. He could not commit suicide himself. He would have to end his life. He would have to have assistance in doing so, and that's what the law was preventing.
That's right. That's the crucial point. He was able to end his own life through reasons of his illness, and so he wanted assistance in doing so. And the case went all the way up to the Supreme Court in the UK, which is, as the name implies, same in lots of other countries, the final court of authority. And Tony Nicholson didn't win. Well, by this point, he'd unfortunately died, and his widow continued the case in his name. But
can I again? I'm terribly sorry to interrupt you, but I think the circumstances of that are worthy of mention. After losing his case,
yes.
He basically said, "I don't want any medical intervention whatsoever."
Yes.
And I think it was within 7 to 10 days he died of pneumonia, in pain and suffering. And as you rightly say, the case then continued to the Supreme Court.
Yes.
And I think the latest position is the Supreme Court said this is a matter for government to determine. But it left open an opportunity. It said if government doesn't make a determination, then it's possible that it can come back to us. Now, the government did have a vote that you'll be able to tell us about. I can't remember how recently it was. And they basically voted against assisted dying. So what is the position now so far as the BHA is concerned and any future court proceedings?
Well, the situation is precisely as you've described it. So because the Supreme Court said that if government didn't sort it out, then they would feel free to sort it out for them in the future, Parliament rather than government actually, there is, of course, now the possibility is open for a new case. And rather, as happened in Canada, where the law was changed through litigation, through a decision of the court, rather than through a positive decision of the government, that would mean that the next time a case comes before the courts in England, we would expect, if we won, the court would say that the UK's current law was incompatible with human rights and the Parliament must act to correct this. So now the next stage is to find a case, someone who is in the appropriate circumstances to get the ruling in their favour, and that's the process we're currently going through at the moment.
So it's a campaign you're still supporting actively?
Absolutely. We're looking to take a case. Now that Parliament has failed to act, we're looking to take a case.
Hogtie, did you want to comment upon this? Is a situation in Canada as Andrew describes?
It is. I don't want to take up too much time, and so I'll be as brief as I can on it. Because the thing is, the situation is still in flux. Because it's a Supreme Court ruling instead of legislation. I mean, legislation would normally proceed through getting all your stakeholders together. Here we have a system of a regulatory and alternate to regulatory governance when it comes to what doctors are supposed to be doing at work. The Supreme Court can't tell doctors what to do, so it's going to be a bit of an issue. So just by really quick fly, I've mentioned this on the show before, that one of the things we have happening in Canada all the time is we had a set of laws that were essentially imported from the old empire. And in 1982, we finally said, well, let's have our own constitution, the front portion of which is the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And since then, we keep going through and finding little bits of law here and there that were inconsistent with it. I think I mentioned before that things like seditious speech, for example, which used to be illegal, was actually a form of permitted speech, under a protected speech rather, under the Constitution Act. So we've had to go and sort of change all these little things here. Well, the Supreme Court in Canada has already ruled in previous cases that people don't have a right to die, so to speak. But since then, there's been reinterpretations, there's been more cases coming up. There was a case of two women in BC, one where one woman helped the other woman die, and the Superior Court didn't see fit to convict this woman for helping her friend die, and no appeals were filed. So it just starts to be this, like, well, now we're just simply not going to pursue these cases anymore. And the Parliament has not come forward with sort of legislation that would solve the problem. And eventually, a case has been filed here again recently. Now, the unanimous ruling is that the term sanctity of life also includes passage into death. So, Supreme Court, with a bit of a wave, says, well, you can't have a sensible charter provision that talks about sanctity of life unless you also contemplate how one might pass into death. So by that, we now empower people to request death. We empower doctors to help people into death without concern that they're going to be charged under the 222 or culpable homicide. We don't have murder. It's culpable and non-culpable homicide. So there's this guarantee there. But the problem is we don't have a system amongst physicians to decide how to do this. And you cannot get a friend, notwithstanding the case that happened in British Columbia, you can't say, well, I have a right to die, therefore I'm going to ask my friend to shoot me. Your friend is going to be in some trouble. So this is a situation that's still in flux here in Canada. It's really nice that the Supreme Court made this decision for us and gave us a push in the right direction, but we don't know what to do with it.
I think that's that's what was described there in terms of the origin of the court's decision is very similar to the case that's been argued in the UK courts. This idea that dying is actually a part of life. Dying, the act of dying, is part of living, and that as a result, the right that people have to a dignified life also extends to the act of dying. That is part of life, and it's the inevitable part of life that we're all going to go through. So the legal reasoning is the same. Could I just respond to two things in the little window?
Yes, please.
Here?
Of course.
Just about humanism again, since it keeps coming up. And I don't know to what extent some of this is because of a confusion of a US use of the word humanism and a UK use of the word humanism. Someone said, I think it was Bert Poole again, that David Livingstone was a Christian who called himself a humanist. I actually don't know about that. I'd be extremely surprised if that were the case. It may well be that he was retrospectively called a humanist in some American literature with the use of that word in the generic, broader sense of a humanitarian, although whether he could be described that way or not, I think would be doubtful. But I think it's highly unlikely, given the use of the word humanist in the 19th century, that he would have described himself that way, because the word humanist in the 19th century, its dictionary definition before the word humanism came in from German, was in terms of a scholar of linguistics, again associated back to sort of the idea of Renaissance humanism and the exploration of ancient culture. So I think it's unlikely that he would have called himself that. And there's a very good book, incidentally, called, well, I shouldn't say that because I'm one of the editors of it, but there's a book. It's that I didn't write the book called
No,
The-
you've got the right to boast, Andrew. Go
you have
on.
to get to the library because it's an academic textbook, so it's very expensive. But if you get to the library, there's a book called The Wiley Blackwell Handbook of Humanism. It's edited by me and by A.C. Grayling, and it has a chapter in the beginning about the origin and use of the word humanism, which might be quite useful. And then the second thing about it was that someone, K8E, I suppose, KT maybe, says the term Christian humanist used to be common, but humanist is now associated solely with atheism or agnosticism. That's actually not true. The phrase Christian humanism comes quite a bit after the use of the simple word humanism to describe the religious worldview in question. So Christian humanism is the later term, not the older one. Anyway, I don't know.
I'm jealous. I'm jealous. You've co-authored a book with A.C. Grayling.
Co-edited. Right.
Co-edited. He won't talk to me anymore.
Oh, really? Why is that?
I had him on a charity event a couple of years ago, and he was on at about 4:00 in the morning. I'd been up for over 24 hours, and I fell asleep. And he won't talk.
Said Anthony, it's your soothing, beautiful voice. There's a lot to hold me off.
I was
I
asleep 20 minutes before he was on. It was very, very embarrassing. Anyway, look, right. I'm aware of the time, and if you'll have to stay with us for the next 12 minutes, so two topics that I really quickly want to discuss. And again, the first one comes from the pages of your website, which is the issue of faith schools. And this is something that I really have not been following sufficiently. So again, a bit of background. Faith schools, I think, were sort of like introduced by Tony Blair at some stage, but explain a little bit about them and what is their history and what's their current position, if you would.
Well, actually, yeah. I mean, so every part of the UK has a different school system, actually. So Wales, England, Northern Ireland, Scotland have different school systems. And we talk about faith schools and the problem they pose today, mostly talking about England. There are problems in the other parts of the UK, obviously in Northern Ireland, very clearly, in their separate religious schooling. But it's only in England that the number of state-funded religious schools is increasing, and their proportion, the number and proportion of religious schools is increasing.
So we're talking about schools that get state funding to have a particular religious sentiment and bias behind them. Yeah,
that's right. They're 100% state funded. Now, there have always been religious schools in the state system in the UK. So since 1944, when the universal right to secondary education was introduced, education post 11 was introduced. Ever since then, about a third of our state schools have been religious schools. Now, what that means is that they, broadly speaking, because every school is different, but what that means is that they're allowed to choose their pupils based on the religion of the parents of those pupils, so they can select Christians, Muslims, Jews, whatever, over and above others. That's obviously quite a shocking fact. They can discriminate in employment in relation to their teachers on a religious basis, all with public money. This is all 100% state funded. And instead of teaching about a range of different religions and non-religious worldviews, which is the obligation on community, non-religious state schools, they can teach their one particular religion in a confessional, indoctrinatory way. Now, that's not to say they all choose to do that, but many of them do, and it's their legal right to do so. So in all sorts of ways, these schools are highly objectionable. Obviously, if you think that children have a right to information and education that is broad and balanced and objective, then you're going to have a problem with a curriculum that is confessional. If you think that state schools should be institutions, bring people from different backgrounds together, they're a universal public service, that young people should learn with and from each other as part of their school life, rather than be segregated and selected on religious grounds, which are also ethnic grounds increasingly, then you're going to have a problem with the fact that religious state schools, faith schools, can select children on those grounds. Now, you mentioned Tony Blair. There's an important, his government and the governments that have come since do occupy an extremely important role in the history of these schools, because although it's true that they've existed since 1944, between then and 2002, their number and proportion was decreasing. Number of state-funded religious schools. Before that, they were almost all Christian with a few Jewish schools. Blair government said that heavily urged on by the Church of England and the Roman Catholic Church, by the way, it didn't just come from this policy. Decided they wanted Muslim schools, Sikh schools, Hindu schools, and so on. A greater diversity of state religious schools, and also an increase in the number of Christian ones, which is where the biggest increase has been, Christian faith schools. So it's a disastrous policy. It's unique in Europe that a state is increasing the number and proportion of its schools that are controlled by religious groups entirely at state expense, and it's going to, I think, greatly damage British society for all the reasons that I've just spelled out.
So going back to the what grinds your gears,
Yes.
scale of 0 to 10, where would you put faith?
Way beyond 10. Way beyond 10.
Okay,
I mean,
where would you put Tony? Where would you put Tony Blair?
Oh well, that's interesting, isn't it? I mean, I think it's difficult to assess a politician's legacy.
I don't think so. I have to interrupt you there. I think his legacy is obviously going to include faith schools.
Yes.
But his legacy is going to be Iraq.
Well,
And you know, however much he now says, no, I'm not even prepared to talk about it or defend myself. That's his legacy, and I have Tony Blair as a 10 for me.
you don't like him, do you? I can tell. Well, I'm not.
Do not
I'm
like him one bum bit.
I'm not going to try and change your mind, but I mean, there are obviously very great things that happened during the Blair government. The Human Rights Act is one of them. The introduction of civil partnerships, the first step to equal marriage recognition for lesbian people. The Equality Act that prescribed all sorts of gender and disability and ethnic discrimination.
That's 2010? Was that him, or was that?
2006 was the first Equalities Act.
Okay.
The second.
All right. I'll tell you what, Andrew. I'll drop him down to a 9. How's that?
I told you, you guys shouldn't have gone with for 10 for the living. You didn't leave yourself any buffer.
I am still 10 flitter. Absolutely. Now, okay, we have 5 minutes left. Andrew, start with you. Oh, okay. We'll try this one. Add.
I know what that is.
Oh, I know, because I showed too much of it in the first place.
Oh, you've given too much away, have you? Oh.
I think I have. Well, you tell me. There we go.
It was the replica of Noah's Ark.
Damn right it was. Did you see it from the image, or did you see it from
No,
the?
yes, I just saw the image.
Yeah.
I just saw the image. I mean,
Okay,
it's very.
So talk us through it, Andrew.
Well, I don't know the story. I mean, I imagine it's a group of, strangers to reason who are presumably believe the story of Noah's Ark, which is a story where God gets very angry and decides to kill everybody, apart from, this one family, and floods the earth in a way suspiciously similar to a great number of other contemporary myths of the time.
And the thing is, Andrew, I apologise for interrupting you because I know that we're only a few minutes left before the show. But one of the things that really irritates me about this story, about the flood, about what is undoubtedly genocide, is that it is supported by Christians. It's supported in toys and songs that are sold to children. that global genocide was a wonderful thing. They all went into the ark two by two. You've got, honestly, if you search Amazon, you'll find all sorts of Noah's ark, sort of like buildings and whatever. But you're right. This is Ken Ham's organization, Answers in Genesis, and
Right.
this is a life-sized model of the ark. And the interesting thing is that you'll see, well, there's a couple of things that are interesting. Firstly, you'll see he's not in any way going to attempt to float this on water. This is going to be land-based. Secondly, you'll see that there are, I can count at least 3 very large cranes that are assisting in the construction of this, which I don't think Noah had. There are also all sorts of different machinery along the bottom that is not quite as identifiable. But he's apparently going to open this. And if you look at how much has been built so far, I think it's a bold claim. He's going to be opening this up on the 7th of July because that is the 7th of the 7th. And if you read Genesis, it says in chapter 7, verse 7, that's when everyone got onto the ark. I don't think, I swear, he's still not got enough money. I don't think that is going to be completed in the next 8 months.
Yeah, 3 cranes or not. Sorry, the fourth one, the white boom that's off to the left of the photo. Is that a concrete pump? I'm gonna get a better copy of this photo and go through it with my.
Well, I can say
newfound.
I'll put a link to the article. No, I won't, because my computer's now shutting down.
It's supposed to be all traditional methods and everything.
All traditional methods, yeah, like
methods and materials. Yeah. But the thing is that boom that's off to the left there, that's the only time I've seen those. That's for getting concrete into formwork that you can't just back a truck up to it and chute load it. So is he putting that much concrete that justifies having a pump around? Because I don't think they had concrete.
Unfortunately, as I say, I could scroll down and show you other images, but
I'll find it. Let's not waste
my internet,
unless Andrew's entertained by this, but
my internet has frozen on this, and I've got a little squiggly circle, which I find, again, on a scale of 1 to 10, I find my computer crashing. I would, okay, litter is 10. I'll have this at 8 because it's really irritating me, and it's still doing it. So there we go.
And Noah's Ark is 8, or the your computer? Oh, your computer is at 8.
Oh, my computer crashing is 8. Yeah. Oh, the Noah's Ark thing.
You're not irritated.
I as a 0 in the same way that you described it. As a 0. Because, oh yes. Your where do we get morality from? Oh, hang on. There we go. I should be able to post this in the side chat. No. It's still not unfrozen. But no, it's like where do you get morality from if there's no God? Noah's Ark to me is so risible, so fanciful. It's such an absolute load of nonsense that it doesn't irritate me at all. It entertains me. So I'd have that as a 0 out of 10.
I'm glad to hear.
Well, there are some elements of this particular story, Noah's Ark, the actual construction of this replica that takes it above 0, and that's the ongoing battle for subsidies, state fund, state-provided subsidies. Apparently, there was going to be tax incentives or tax breaks, and that was revoked because it's very clearly religious themed. And Ken Ham's organization is actually suing the state now to enforce, tax breaks that I don't know how you sue the government for tax breaks, but whatever.
Well, I can tell you this very briefly, that they still need a couple more $1 million to have finished. Again, here's a question for you: How much do you think that this has cost? This is in Genesis or whatever to create this
Well, I don't know. A lot of money that could be spent on something a lot more useful.
But that's my point. Yeah.
Come on,
Well, both private and public funds,
I'll take your answers in dollars.
Okay. $3 million.
Okay. Hogtown.
No,
That much.
your order of magnitude. It's that's a $30 million
Oh,
venture.
I think you're both terribly way off. So far as I can understand the story, and oh, hang on, yeah, now I can copy and paste. Copy and paste. I'll put it into the Vaughan chat. I think we're looking at a figure much closer to $90 million.
it's disgusting.
Yes.
Disgusting. Yeah.
Imagine, and I know, Andrew, your organisation, just what you could do with that sort of money. And another organisation that I strong supporter of, Doctors Without Borders, Médecins Sans Frontières, what they would be able to do with that money.
It's awful.
This 90 million potentially tax-free money is being wasted on this joke, absolute joke. On that bombshell.
Yeah.
Andrew, we've gone past the 2-hour mark, and
Sending us all the way.
you have been absolutely wonderful, and thank you very much for staying for the 2 hours.
Thank you.
Can I thank everyone for watching, and can I have a thumbs up, please, from everyone for Andrew and his wonderful contribution to the program. We will be back with you in a couple of weeks' time. I hope to add, and Andrew, you can send me this through email. Any links to sites that you want me to put into the description of the YouTube video, I will certainly do that. But can I thank Andrew very much indeed. It's always a pleasure. You're always incredibly entertaining, very interesting, and remarkably calm. What? Come on. Is there what? Give me another 10 out of 10 that would for anger and frustration and annoyance.
I don't like it when people say yourself instead of you, or myself instead of I. I'm a grammar Nazi.
Okay, I love that.
If someone says, will that be good for yourself? When they mean, will that be good for you?
Yeah.
There you go. That's not just 10, that's 110. That really, that actually drives me insane.
Wow, have I done that at all during the course of the last?
I would definitely have noticed, believe me.
Thank goodness for that. On that bombshell, thank you all very much. I'll be ending the show. Please, both gentlemen, stay with me. We'll have a quick chat afterwards. But broadcast, and that one, and broadcast, and that one. See you in 2 weeks.